So yeah, we are the Dungeon Masters for the Young Adventurers program here at Zulu's Board Game Cafe. By way of introductions, we'll just do a quick around the table, kind of how long you've played, how long you've been doing online D&D, and then any other accolades that you'd like to mention. So I'll go ahead and start. I've been playing D&D for about 20 years now. I started in 3rd edition, played 3.5, sort of started playing other role-playing games for a while in that sort of 4th edition area, and then I've returned to D&D when I was gifted a 5th edition player's handbook, and that sort of escalated. But we'll get into that later. I've done online stuff before this, but we've been doing online in earnest since was that March?
March.
When did the world explode? March.
The very end of March. Basically the beginning of April.
Yeah. Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, so I'm Alex. Otherwise, some people call me Kenny. But I've been playing D&D definitely since 4th edition, and I've been playing on and off. And then, like you said, the world kind of exploded. And then I've just jumped in on the program and been hanging out, having fun. And just running D&D sessions. So I got to play a little bit of 4th edition, but I'm mostly playing 5th edition.
Jason, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Jason. I've been playing for a very long time. I started when I was 10. My mom came home with the basic Dungeons & Dragons from a garage sale. And I remember trying to play with it. Didn't come with dice, it came with chits, so way back.
Is that the red box?
Actually, it was a blue book, so I still have the book. But yes, it's even before the red box. It was published in like '78, but I would have only been 2 at the time. So, but I got it from a garage sale, and since then I really got into Marvel superheroes when I was 11. That was the TSR or that same company made a role-playing game where you played superheroes. And I have played different games and D&D ever since. I kind of fell out. I didn't play 4th edition, and I played a little of 3rd. I was still reading the books, but I wasn't playing D&D. And 5th edition, I have a son, and he was turning 9, and so I really got him into it. So, yeah, and he runs his own game now. So, and he's 14 now.
That actually reminds me. I did start at 12. So if you want to do your quick math to figure out how old I am. But yeah, so Jason, how old were you when you started playing D&D?
Oh, I was 10.
So not Jason, Alex.
Oh, sorry.
Well, so 10 sounds about right. It was either 10 or 12. I don't quite remember.
All of us started at a very young age. Which is, I think, why it's so kind of fun for us to be able to give that to a new generation in so many ways. To be like, that thing that we were doing when we were but wee lads, we can sort of help usher in a new generation, so to speak, to this, which I find very enjoyable. I also, now looking back, think to myself, why in the world did anyone let me play D&D with them? Because I'm sure I was more annoying than the kids that we have. Not that our kids are annoying in any way. They're delightful. They're in fact a delight to have with. So as a real quick sort of point of context, there's one of the things that I heard as I was looking for. Someone's asking for us to back up.
Backing up.
So there was some discussion on Facebook about what kind of programs we use, how we set it up, and we were very first looking at the option. I pulled up Roll20 and I had the dynamic lighting because I'd played with it before. I had actually my parents live in Boise, Idaho, well around there, and we had played D&D on Roll20. So I was familiar with the program. I thought it could be fun. I pulled it up and was showing Jason some of the dynamic lighting stuff, and I was like, hey, you can move a little token around. And he was like, oh, the kids are absolutely going to move their tokens. They're going to reveal things that they shouldn't and go all kinds of places. And I thought for a second, I was like, yeah, no, they absolutely will. Also, let's be honest, Roll20 is pretty complicated. There's a lot of fiddly stuff that you need to do. The tracking is great. The clicking on stuff is great. The dynamic lighting is beautiful. But there's so much stuff to learn, and I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't regularly using Roll20, so I'm not as comfortable with the program itself. And I know there's also Fantasy Grounds and all that good stuff. Additionally, you need to buy all the books. So, and I have physical books, and I've started transitioning into D&D Beyond, which we'll probably touch on later. But there was a lot of sort of upfront costs. There was a lot of sort of learning to use it, and actually, I'm glad ultimately we decided to not go with Roll20 because we ended up. There's a social deduction game called Blood on the Clock Tower, and we tried to play it with some friends, and our adult friend, as soon as it started drawing inappropriate things on the background and moving stuff around and ended up deleting the sun. And it was like, he's an adult. And he immediately started wrecking things. I can imagine what a kid would do. Again, not saying that they're troublemakers, but on occasion, trouble can be had. So to sort of mitigate that, we ended up deciding to not go with Roll20. Additionally, I had heard as things were getting started that the kids were using Zoom for class, so I figured what better way to sort of, have people dive in than to use Zoom. They already know it, they already have an account. There's so much less work, because one of the things that you don't want to do is give kids work, because I don't know if you've experienced this before, but trying to tell a kid, like, hey, just copy and paste the URL into a new window, and then we can open that up for you. I've literally had kids be like, how do you do that? I was like, okay, back to fundamentals. How do you copy and paste? I'm like, well, you highlight it. They're like, what do I highlight?
There's a button called Control, so you make sure that you press and hold that, and then press the C. That's to copy. Sometimes you have to reload your page, so there's up in the top left corner, there's going to be a little swirly arrow that you got to click on.
Well, that also depends. It depends on what they're using it on too. Some of them are on iPads, some of them are on computers, some are on phones. Yeah. So that's another thing, is trying to decipher. And they usually don't know what they're using. They're just playing. Yeah.
So ultimately, removing as many sort of steps of failure, going back to this delightful stream so far, is just making things as simple as humanly possible. Is ultimately what we ended up going with, which then sort of, I think, naturally sort of moves into the next part of it, which is, I guess, do we want to talk about character sheets and dice rolling, or do we want to talk about the map?
I mean, I'm good with whatever we want to start with. I do have a display.
Right, I have someone yelled. So ultimately, we need to decide, because miniatures, I think, help a lot of people with sort of orientation and knowing where things are. Don't get me wrong, I'm a theater of the mind kind of guy, and I love it. But even adults sometimes are like, I don't understand what you just told me. Where are things at? So for those of you who have motion sickness issues, please hold on to your hats, because I'm going to show you what a typical D&D session. Oh, look, there's
I've got it.
We got multiple.
I'll show you.
I'm not going to show off, because I just don't want to blow everybody out of the water.
Right, exactly. So here I've got collected the orc army attacking the castle. Wow! If anyone has ever played the board game Castle Panic, this is kind of what I'm imagining the scene to be. There's a giant tower, and there's also a castle in the background. The wall is filled with separate knights of all sorts of types and whatnot. And yeah, it's even more fun because sometimes I get to play.
You say old toys; they're current toys now.
I didn't know that was
Oh yes.
All I got is this boat. But yeah, ultimately we decided that since we already have the miniatures, we already have the maps, instead of trying to create a digital replica of things, we would just use the miniatures like we normally would, but then sort of let us, use the camera as our point of view. Now, I've discovered that this has some definite sort of benefits and detriments. The first kind of, for me, the learning curve was figuring out sort of the angle of attack. When I very first started, I had a very tall camera angle that was basically looking directly down on the map, all the mini-maps kind of style. So that was, I discovered relatively quickly that being able to see the whole map isn't necessarily important in the same way as, being able to get a little closer, because, you've got different sizes of cameras, you got different qualities of camera. So being able to kind of get up close and personal is, I think, a little better. And you guys actually started with that more sort of up close and personal.
So when we started, Alex and I were working together, because Alex hadn't DM'd before, and we were trying to figure out. So he was actually kind of working as my cameraman and co-DM, and so we were able to do a lot more from a camera point of view. But it made us learn also that you can use the camera as an eye or as a camera. So you can set up shots where there's like, where there's a creature just out of shot. So you move it slightly and you reveal the bigger monster, or you can hide a creature in the bushes and pull the camera up and kind of like, oh, you made your perception roll? There you go. You can kind of, you can do different things. You can swap out miniatures. Obviously, you can do this in a regular tabletop game where you're present, but you can do a lot of things. Like you can have just things up, behind where the camera is and pull back. That's always fun. You don't see inside the rooms and stuff, or see what we set up getting ready. So that's a lot of fun.
I'm just showing off all the super cool angles that you can do with the camera, just because it's like, oh, I didn't realize that the camera could do this. Instead of literally putting your face right up to the miniature, you can actually put the camera right up to it. So then you get like a zoom in effect of like, well, here's the scary orc. Watch out.
Yeah, or models like our buddy Terrence here, you can sort of do a quick pan and then, oh my gosh, what is that many-limbed, many-armed monstrosity that seeks to kill you?
Oh my goodness. That's so true. So another great thing is that we like to, we'll be able to share miniatures. So it's funny that you called him Terrence, because in a couple of my games, his name is Jeffrey.
I think it was Michael and mine. But we all didn't name him this. The children all, kids all went and gave different names on their own. And they always picked a human boy name. That's kind of interesting.
For some reason.
I mean, it's very, very boyish, I guess. Oh, hello, Rob.
There's Rob again.
One of the things, and I forgot to do this before, but one of the things you can do with Zoom, which is kind of nice, is you can turn off your camera to then move things around, which I should have done before, and I'm sorry that I didn't. So you can have your camera set up sort of watching the thing. Hey, you're watching the thing, but then if you want to switch back to yourself, hey, it's back to me. Terrible quality, but, we're looking at different things.
It just
happens. However, one of the things I've noticed is, Alex, you're using OBS to get yourself with the picture-in-picture, so you're down at the bottom.
I'm just hanging out in the corner. When I first was able to figure out how OBS works, and I was just like, hey kids, check this out. They were like, whoa, in the corner, what? And it was amazing to see their reaction. Just to be like, oh, wait a second, what the?
So some of the challenges I've run into with this, for the most part, is that kind of like picking where people want to go. There's been more than a couple of times where they're like, I want to go over there to the left. That's the other thing. Left and right don't really mean anything with the orientation, because you're going to be at a different place that your camera is, and left and right on the camera is going to be different. So if they're like, say their character is the blue cloaked one. Alex, could I get you to move my guy over to that orc on the left?
This way or this way?
That way.
This way.
Yes. No, the one with the red pants. The big axe.
Oh, the red pants.
There we go.
Okay, cool.
So yeah,
right.
That was, and I don't know why my kid's voice was particularly kid-like, but and then fighting happens.
Yeah.
Have you guys run into any sort of problems with
navigation
miniatures this way?
Yeah, a lot. My solution is, for the most part, when I introduce like a horde, I try and scale it back as much as I can, not to have a ton of them on there, and then I kind of give them some trait that'll, like this guy has one eye, so he's one eye, and so then they're like, I go after one eye, will help a bit, although it really helps if the miniature has something. If you're doing a horde thing, it's best to have like a bunch of different looking miniatures. If you have a bunch of the same, unless you can like put numbers on them or something, it can get really confusing. I know, because Alex and I ended our first adventure ends with a giant orc battle like this, and that would get confusing. Just kind of running like a big horde of gnolls and orcs, and
All right, so we got Orc Squad number 1 over here, Orc Squad number 2 way over to the side, and then, you're gonna fight Orc number 6, 7, and 8 of Orc Squad number 5? Okay, all right, that works.
One of the things that I find fascinating, and I don't know if you guys had this as well, is specific miniatures become very specific characters. So like I have my Dragonborn mini that he has been used for a handful of different characters, but now if that miniature touches the tabletop, everyone is like, that's Fireline Saba. Like it's Fireline. And I'm like, I mean, sure, but like it can be anything. Like, no, that's Fireline. We need a different model. I'm just like,
oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was something I found very fascinating. Is you gotta make sure that you know kind of who. Some models will end up being specific people, which isn't bad. I think that actually can be kind of nice. It forces me to actually like try looking what other models I have available and using different ones. Because for the longest time, I had a bunch of the orc minis from oh goodness, what was it called? There's the Lord of the Rings. Games Workshop did a Lord of the Rings tabletop game, and I had a whole bunch of orcs from that, a bunch of Urukai. And I was just like, they're sort of gray models, but they're whatever. They hit the table. I use them as guards. There's bandits. There's basically any humanoid ever. But seeing it on the screen over and over again in like close detail, these sort of gray blobs, I became more and more just like, I hate them so much. They are gross. And so that kind of forced me to paint some models, which was actually kind of nice. It's good to get some painted stuff.
And speaking of miniatures that have just become characters, I'm showing off Infernius, the Dragonborn Barbarian, and he's running away from either. Let's see, what are his names? So he's kind of morphed into a large crag, or some groups have him be their best friend named Karag, and he just loves cookies. And Karag talk like this a lot. Karag enjoy cookies.
Whereas for my kids, he was Blacktooth.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is when you're using minis, you're like, did I use this mini as a specific person in this group? Because I'm running like 5, my different campaigns are kind of doing different things. So I'll be like, if I put this on the table, they're going to think it's, that character returning. And like, so you have to be like, okay, no, I haven't used it as that. And it's this character in this game and that character in that game. So yeah, that's always fun too.
A lot of fun mind exercises that we've got.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're dealing with kind of a different challenge than I think a lot of people will, in that we're running, I'm between 5 and 8 games in a week, most of which are running kind of similar storylines. So I had like 2 or 3 groups all start essentially around the same time relatively recently, and I kind of start them in the same spot, and generally they'll sort of vary on where they go, but for this particular one, for a pretty good amount of it, they were essentially doing the same thing, but at slightly different times. Just by virtue of how the kids end up playing, they'll end up finishing things a little bit faster, a little bit slower than others. And so I'm trying to, and it's funny too, because I'll sometimes, I'll actually like start the session talking about things that another group had done, and they'll sort of look at me like, why are you crazy, sir? So that was an interesting challenge that I don't know that the average sort of person doing online D&D is going to run into. But ultimately, as far as maps are concerned, we have determined that just using the miniatures you already have, I mean, obviously a tripod is nice. I have a little 3-legged tripod thingy that I can attach my camera to. But even if you don't have that necessarily, like a box or a pile of books will work equally as well to sort of give your camera a place to hang out. Having a camera that is detachable, though, is extremely helpful when streaming. Trying to basically like turn your laptop or phone towards the thing that you're doing is kind of a pain. If you're on a phone, you can flip to the front-facing camera so you can still see what's going on, but then you've got one more thing to worry about. So whenever possible, try to reduce the number of things that you have to do simultaneously, because as you're running the game, we've lost Alex.
Yep.
As you're running the game, you've got to worry about making sure that the characters make sense. You've got to make sure that the dice are making sense. You don't want to also be worrying about what's your camera doing. So if you can get it on a tripod, get it pointed to the thing, that will make your life so much easier.
Yeah. Or you can also detach your camera as well. So I just turned off my camera so I could set something cool up. Here we go. So that's my face. So let me go ahead and swap over. So here, it's the castle. All right, I moved it. Normally it has a lid, and if you're like playing in real life, you can't really like see inside the castle. But if you've got a camera that you can take off the tripod, you can definitely set the camera inside the castle. So then you can see the people inside the castle. And you see, they're just having their morning meeting, sharing coffee, while the front wall is getting attacked by an army of orcs.
Another thing I'd like to say is that I tend to use my phone as a second Zoom person in the Zoom meeting. So I use the camera, but I have a tripod for it. The benefit to that is I don't have any wires. So I can plop it down and keep it as I need to. I move it about so I can give different angles from different characters' point of view, which is something we did a lot when Alex was the cameraman, because he could get right in there and that's one of the other benefits of a camera is you can do things like here's your point of view, here's what your character sees. You can get line of sight down pretty good, especially for archers or spellcasters. It's going to be very helpful.
It is so cool to just be able to be like, oh, bam! That's what you see.
So one of the things, the reason I almost died just a second ago was because, say you don't have, because we've got a lot of fancy models and things because we have a delightful support network and each of us have been playing for a bit. So say you don't have all the fancy bits and bobs, there is in fact another solution. So I have, oh goodness, there we go. So this is an old map. It's been it's seen better days, but this was something I had drawn essentially to kind of describe to the kids what's going on. So this is the place that they're trying to get into. You can see there's a couple letters. Those are a couple of the different kids and where they're going. Trying to set this up with miniatures would be extremely difficult. But what I can do with this is I can be like, all right, so Jason, you're here. Alex, you're here. And the enemies are coming down the road that way. Where do you want to go?
I'm going to hide, and I'm going to throw a rock so they hear where Alex is, and so they go after him, and I run away.
Okay, so do you want to head into this alley here?
Yes.
Perfect. So, Alex, you've been thrown under the bus by your teammate. Prepare to be arrested.
Okay, you got it. Yes, sir.
Again, we're still fancy here. We still got this awesome book. But even if you're less fancy, you do have just good old-fashioned piece of paper. This is a map for a different game, and so you can just and that happens to be a sci-fi game. But even just a piece of paper that you scribble some stuff onto, you can create that that map, and you can help kind of immerse people into the game as you're playing through it. So I realized we were showing a lot of the kind of fancier stuff, and I'm like, it doesn't have to be too fancy.
Right, exactly.
All right.
Just as long as you have Zoom, Wi-Fi connection, and access to multiple tabs open, then you can definitely either run the game or you can just be a part of the game.
All right. So speaking of which, did we want to wander over to D&D Beyond?
Oh boy.
All right, yeah. I mean,
that's another crucial tool. That's one thing that makes it super easy is having a central place that everybody's looking at the same kind of thing for their character sheet. So you can see their character sheet, they can see their character sheet, and they can get help. So you can click on a spell, and it gives you that information. It makes all the difference in the world for running online and in person.
I'm going to slow down my computer just a little bit. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm also trying to pull up some D&D Beyond.
So, one of the things that we discovered relatively early on was trying to have people's characters in PDF format is relatively difficult. But what you can do, which is delightful, is if you create someone's character in a campaign, you can A, keep it organized, which is invaluable. But then B, you can send them a link to it's the read-only version. So that way you can sort of maintain the character sheet itself. There's some groups that I'll have them claim their characters. There's other groups where just they're young enough or inexperienced enough that it would be sort of difficult for them. So I like to make their life as easy as possible.
That is very true.
Oh, here we go. So back in the day I made a third level character for each of the different classes. Just for doing one shots and things. What class do you want to play? Barbarian, cool, pre-made character. So I'm pulling up one of those bad boys.
Right. Let's see. Yeah, I was looking around, just being like, what could I pull up? Are there any characters I want to spotlight and be like, hey, check this out?
Yeah. So I'm gonna mess with things a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm doing a screen share. Woo, look at us.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
Barbarian the Barbarian.
All right.
Cool. So, yeah, having the character sheets sort of in an interactive format is incredibly invaluable, and being able to sort of there's a lot of I've got the stuff there.
Oh no, everything.
Monsters.
Oh, I see that the barbarian is a dragonborn. That is definitely something that threw me for a loop. I am honestly surprised at how many times kids want to be like, I want to be a dragonborn. I'm like, sure thing. So like I just now have this platoon of dragonborn minis that are now painted because every kid wants to play a dragonborn. Who doesn't want to play as a dragonborn?
They've got that +2 strength. Also, somebody noted that my this barbarian is particularly charismatic. What's funny is a lot of times I'll find barbarians in particular are wanting to intimidate a lot and wanting to persuade a lot. Like that's the thing that's used. Intimidate is used a lot, and intimidate is your charisma. So charisma. So yeah, having a high charisma is definitely helps.
I always try to think of charisma as being more just your force of personality. So somebody with a low charisma isn't ugly or anything necessarily, or likable. They're not as likable, but they're more forgettable. Somebody with a low charisma would be like what doesn't make an impression, isn't good at expressing their opinion. So that's like persuasion. It's kind of because like charisma in our heads, we always think like, my character's not pretty, but you do want your character to be memorable. So you always remember that with a low charisma, you're gonna have a lot harder time. Just when you want to growl at somebody or roar like a dragon, having a high intimidation and charisma is good.
Yeah.
And then there are some cases where I'm like, oh, you're a dragonborn and you want to roar like a dragon? Roll an intimidation check. I'll give you advantage this time. You're being creative.
Well, that's one of the things that I actually I'll run into a lot. Especially kids have a delightful creativity to them, and one of the things I really enjoy about D&D is that it is a little bit more structured, so that can make things a little bit more simple. A game like Fate or even the White Wolf games, they get a little bit more sort of you can do anything, but then analysis paralysis I think can sometimes cause people to be like, I don't know what to do. So many times I've been playing games and I've basically, the kids group has made it to a town. I'm like, all right, you're in this town. What do you want to do? And they'll just stare at me like I'm a crazy person. Whereas if I give them 2 choices or even 3 choices, it's much easier to be like, I want to do this, this, or this. Yeah, that can kind of help sort of narrow things down. Again, that's very much sort of group by group. All of that is to say, D&D in many ways is very structured. So if a kid wants to come up with interesting and creative ways to use their spells are particularly bad at this. There are very specific sort of like guidelines for those spells. So I often find myself trying to reward that level of creativity because the last thing I want to do is have some kid be like, I'm doing something really interesting and fun. And then I have to be like, ooh, that doesn't work like that. So I think with kids especially, I will a lot of times end up I'll sort of fudge the rules a little bit. So going back to that kind of advantage thing, like if they can come up with a good reason for why their character has advantage, absolutely, let's do it. Let's go nuts because they're engaging. Like the point of having them roll those dice is not necessarily to see if they succeed or fail or if they built that powerful character. For me, a lot of times it's could you come up with a viable reason for why your character should succeed at this. So that's more kind of the meta of running games with kids.
And going back to the point of kids, so going back to the point of kids being super creative and also wanting to tell like a cool story, I actually have a story. So I have one kid, he's still running, and he's playing as a Warforged. Essentially, they are like robot people. And so his name was Red, but the only Warforged I had was blue, like literally the color blue. So and there's his mini right there. And so he came up with the idea that his character had a twin brother named Blue, but in red armor. And so what is the only reasonable thing for a DM to do to help a kid do storytelling? Literally get the identical mini, so he has an identical twin brother, and paint him up red.
I like it. Silliness.
It's a very fun story, and he's just like, wait, hold on, no, I'm the blue one, but named Red, and he's the red one named Blue.
The creator was colorblind.
Yeah, I mean, they were saying that the dad just got them switched. So that's always a fun story to tell.
Yeah, it's funny how much the minis do end up informing the characters. Like saying, like, if you pull out a mini and it has a flaming sword, they're gonna want a flaming sword.
I mean, who doesn't though? Flaming swords.
Yes, you guys have both ever dealt with that. I haven't, because I don't have any minis with flaming swords, luckily, or maybe not luckily. I've actually had flaming swords in the game, but no minis with flaming swords. Yeah. So
there you go.
So my question for you guys: what is, do you think, the biggest challenge you've run into so far doing these online D&D sessions?
Tech issues would be my number one hurdle. Like, they're not horrible, but when they happen, and they can kind of like send everything for a little bit of a loop. That is actually probably my, I mean, there's issues with timing and stuff. That's all behind the scenes stuff of getting all the kids together. It's worse when it's real life is going on instead of this weirdness. Yeah, I'd say that's mine.
No, I definitely agree with the whole technical issues would be the biggest challenge. Like at the beginning of our stream today, we were having some technical issues, but that's totally fine. Beside the point. I'll go ahead and make myself full screen so you guys can see my face. But yeah, so technical issues, making sure that I have steady Wi-Fi is definitely a number one thing. Because if I start cutting out, then the kids are going to be like, wait, what'd you say? And then they can't really participate that well because they only heard half of the story.
That's another one that's interesting, is kids won't often say when they don't hear something until it's already happened. So they won't give you you can realize you've been talking for a couple minutes explaining the whole scene, and they'll be like, I didn't hear any of that. And you're like, oh no, whoops.
I've had more than a couple times where I've gotten, like, we were leveling up and I was explaining the different subclasses for the thing, and I was like, I was given the basic rundown, like the way of the shadow, you have taken the essence of shadow itself, and you're kind of doing the thing. The way of the palm is like pressure points and all that stuff. And I went through all the different subclasses, and I was like, all right, so which one do you want to go with? And like, what subclass do you want to do? They're like, oh, I didn't hear any of that.
It's the best.
Yeah.
And I think that's why ultimately trying to sort of reduce the amount of things that the players end up needing to do is I think very important to try and help minimize the difficulty. Yeah, I think for me sometimes the challenge that I've sort of run into is I think less so far technically I haven't had many difficulties so far. I think kind of the solution that I had that we probably should have done before this stream, and it will be better next time, is kind of trying to do like a test run beforehand. Kind of to make sure you're. I mean, obviously, when you actually get to the day itself, things are going to go wrong. They always do. But yeah, that's kind of what I've done to try and mitigate my technical issues.
Yeah, no, normally when I'm running a session like right before, I'm always like, where's the camera angle I'm going to start with? And like so you're kind of, I'll run a quick little Zoom call before it starts, hopefully to get that look, and like, okay, then, but yeah, and anytime, like, I'll try a different setup, and that's always iffy. Like, even just changing where your windows are, sometimes we'll find out it's way more convenient. Oh, I've been doing it the hard way this whole time, but you're scared to change it, because the more you change it, the more like you're going to cause a chain reaction of things getting like, oh, I thought that would make it faster, but that was way harder. And like, I only implementing one change at a time, because you can't go back, especially when you're running the game. You're playing for 2 hours. You don't want to waste that time. You want to be playing.
Yeah. No, agreed.
And another thing I wanted to say is, like, one of the things I find most interesting is the fact that it is growing more, where you notice that the kids are making kind of bonds, because having played from the beginning in March, a lot of the kids it's the same groups. Some of them have changed a little bit, but man, those kids are really bonding, and they like to talk together too. So that can be an issue where you're like, now I'm wrangling you to play. Which is great. I mean, I like that. It's an outlet for social outlet too, because that's what it's meant to be.
Yeah, just yesterday, I like the first 10 minutes of the whole session, like they were just like talking about how they were starting school, and I'm just like, guys, let's do D&D. Let's go back to D&D. Come on, guys. Okay, I do appreciate school, but let's go to D&D.
Yeah, I had everybody showing all their pets and naming them, so it was kind of a show and tell at the beginning.
That's one of the things that's kind of nice. One of the things that I've actually kind of enjoyed about this sort of format is, like the weird kind of thing sometimes. You're playing, I think, a little bit differently when you're kind of at your own home. I think at one point, one of the kids was like, "Oh my gosh, there's a deer in our yard," and like actually like pointed their camera out their window at this deer.
Well, that's
so
cool.
that was kind of a funny detail. And actually, I guess that's the next question I have on my nice little pre-made list of questions. Is there anything you like better about running games digitally as opposed to sort of in person?
So Alex is in a unique position where he wasn't a DM. He played games, but he wasn't a DM before this. So he has a different like outlook than Rob and myself. Where I literally, like, when I started playing as a DM. Like when I was 10, like nobody else was playing, so I had to run. So I mean, I played games too, but I've run way more than I've ever played. But saying that, I like the personal, like, you can do things with the virtual experience, like not having people there. You don't have to worry about drinks being spilled or food going all over your stuff. Like when Rob and I both run for kids in person, and your space is limited. Like having the whole table to set your stuff up, rather than having to have space for character sheets and die rolling and all that. That's very free. I mean, that's really nice. That's probably my biggest, like, actually I'd say space is like, yeah.
I've definitely sort of spread out. I'm using our downstairs left room, and I've sort of just like spread myself out. Because when I was doing the in-person groups with the kids, I had so many bags and boxes and things that I would all bring to the table. Then I had to sort of like make a pile next to the table. And yeah, it is. And actually, right now, having the ability to just sort of have your stuff available to you, because I'm a collector, it's a problem. So having like access to that stuff is so very, very helpful. Like this boat, I would not be able to take this boat to most sessions, but the fact that it's just here means that I can be like, oh, cool, we'll use it. Actually, so before the pandemic started, I had actually made a whole storyline that was like this whole thing where there's this captain that uses magic to steal people and press gang them into his ship or into his crew, because I knew that we had this ship and I was like, oh, I want to use it. It'll be so cool. Go on these like boat adventures, and I'll even get a second one, and like there'll be like boat to boat combat. I did 2 months of this session, so that was 8 weeks of this with a couple different groups, and I didn't get out the boat until like the final session for both of them, because I'm like, this is too much of a pain to try and lug around. I've got 3 bags and a box of minis that I'm already moving. I don't want to worry about this. So yeah, that's having
just like the massive orc army for the final battle that Jason was mentioning, like it's almost impossible to just be like, well, every week I'm bringing it out, and then instead of just being like, it's going to be secretly over somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and also we've been really lucky. We have this giant castle set that I've run many games on now, because it's just a really fun and beautiful thing to kind of play around on. I don't know if that's necessarily like we're in a unique situation, but I think just as sort of your I'm playing at home sort of DMs, the biggest advantage you have is you can kind of spread out a little more, which I really, really like.
Yeah.
I do have to mention, I want to give a shout out to Andrew, who's another one of our coworkers. He made a ton of fantastic, beautiful trees that we are able to use them and have this fantastic forest. He loves these trees. Yeah, I'll always bring up the trees with Andrew.
Yeah, and he also lent us a lot of his wargaming stuff. So that is fantasy based. So we have a lot of like building walls and stuff, which that is huge. We utilize that so much.
I think a
and
little
he
bit of
painted like some
verticality can
campsites and
really
stuff.
go a long ways.
Yeah.
You've got your camera, like having that, because I feel like, especially like when you're playing with the battle mat, you can kind of like you're kind of into it, you're doing your thing. But when it comes to like those camera angles, having that little bit of verticality to be able to really add more body to the scene, I think can do amazing things.
And it doesn't have to be expensive either. I've got stuff at home. I've got little aquarium plants, which I got for a couple bucks, but you just like spread them out on the table and it makes like, oh, that looks, it's grass. And, or like I use like Spanish moss for vines and stuff like that. That's at a craft store for like $1. You find things like, or I've used, I did one was in the elemental plane of air. And so I got stuffing from a dog toy. And so it just kind of pulled it out and it was clouds. And, and that kind of stuff, like it's, and we do use, I saw the comment, we do use Warlock as well. We've been using it a lot, especially the indoor one, the new one.
Yeah, I discovered, I'll be honest, I am a seat of my pants DM. 90% of the time, I have no idea how any given session is going to turn out. So pre-making maps is something I don't generally do, and I feel like Warlock sort of lends itself to that sort of like pre-build this building. What I've discovered, actually, much to my great joy, is that as long, and this goes back to the thing, if I was doing this in person, I would have to pre-make all of my maps, because inevitably it'll be touched, and when the tiles are sitting next to each other, they get jostled very easily. But if I'm the only one sitting there, I can just basically take the tiles, set them up, and without clipping them or anything, and then just point the camera at it, and it's good to go. Additionally, one of the things I'll love to do is I'll essentially be like, I'll show them the first room with the doors and with the camera pointed at it. Then I'll shut off, they're like, I want to open that door. So I'll shut off the camera, build the room, like put the tiles out, make it there, and then turn the camera back on. So at any given time, they don't know what's through the door because I haven't pre-built it. That might be because I have no idea what's on the other side of the door, and essentially as I'm setting the tiles down, the room is being built in front of me, which is always exciting. But it could also be that I don't want kids to be making or players in general to be making their decisions of where they go based on what they can see inside the building, because you put a map down, the pre-made map with stuff on it, if they see it, they're going to go touch it. I have a map with a bunch of mushrooms, and there happens to be, just as part of the sort of thing in it, there's a pair of legs sticking out from underneath one of the mushrooms. Inevitably, if I show that map, they're going to investigate that body. No matter what, that body will be investigated. Even though I don't necessarily have it in the...
Careful placing a train on pre-made maps is super necessary. You're like, oh, there's a treasure pile right there. If they see that, that's game over. That's all that's going to go through their heads. And I don't even have a reason for there to be treasure in this corner. So there's a big rock there. So,
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the other thing, too. And one of the things that you can... mimics. I love mimics. Sorry, I keep watching the chat.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've actually found that can be very interesting is, and especially because we are doing a lot of stuff and we are having to go through a lot of different scenes and we want to have it that extra sort of cinematic quality. So I have the kind of the pre-made maps from D&D that has a variety of different scenes on it, and I like using those because they're very pretty. But one of the things I've discovered is they get used to them. Going back to the whole miniatures thing, the same thing is true of the maps. But what I've discovered is that with just a little bit of sort of adding some stuff onto it, you can really change the look of the map. So like I've got this guy, it's pre-made. There's a lot more onto it.
Right, of course.
But you can sort of change the layout of the map by putting just different stuff on it.
Yeah.
And because you're using a camera, you can really kind of sell that illusion, just by putting some other stuff on.
And real quick, because we were talking about the Warlock tiles, I had them right next to me, so I'm kind of... So I set up a bunch of rooms with my set where they're just square rooms, but the inner ones, they kind of like go in so you can restructure it on the fly as to what it is. Like right here, I kind of set up so I'm trying to show the angle here. So there's a room with a closet. These are doors, but you can kind of see. I mean, they're very cool. But yes, they are super handy for that. But like Rob was saying, he's going to show putting something over it. It changes the map.
Yeah. So you've got this building with this little roof. You can turn it into something else. So you can kind of hide what's there. But say if you don't want to, because this crack is sort of oddly specific. If I don't want that there, then I just sort of place this here, and maybe that now is a this is the patio. This way. This is this sort of dirty patio for this house.
That's actually pretty sweet. So going back to Jason pointing out the warlock tiles, it's funny, and I kind of chuckled a little bit. I know that you have, like, it's a serious building, like there's a little closet inside. I've used that, so we like to borrow each other's stuff. I've used that as a hotel. So whenever I look at that, I'm always like, oh, it's the kids going to the hotel in the big city.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it was an apothecary with a hidden room where they were hiding, where a person was hiding out from the law in a little hidden door in one of mine. So yeah, you can do lots of different things. You know, it can be the magic closet that leads to Narnia if you want. You know, that's the glory of role playing games. It's just kind of limited by imagination.
That was just a halfling's room.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, I think what I think would actually be a lot of fun, and this is gonna be a little bit more of an in-depth thing. We'll have to plan a little better. But I'd love to do like a show and tell of the things that we use. Because like I said, I've been collecting stuff for a while. Jason, you have a delightful plethora of strange things, and Alex, you've been sort of forced into this. You've just stuff is sort of,
he's been digging through his garage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like your castle was a delightful thing. So one of the things that I'd love to do later on is to do a stream where we talk about our different sort of bits and bobs and how we use them and what we like about them and that sort of thing. Because we've learned a lot so far, and partially through just trial by fire. And like in a given week, again, we're doing between 5 and 8 sessions a week, whereas most people are doing like 1 a week. So essentially, we're at an extremely accelerated pace as far as learning new things about running games, about that sort of thing.
I know I've definitely grown, and I actually run 7 sessions.
Oh, we lose you?
Oh, wait, am I there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was just saying, I definitely know that I personally have grown a lot because I actually run sessions every single day of the week. And most days it's just 1, but sometimes I run 2 a week, or 2 a day.
Yeah.
No, and like I said, you learn very quickly what works and what doesn't. So you're always adapting. You're like, oh, well, I had this great idea, but somebody's going to be the guinea pig for my idea.
Oh, that is so true.
So I had a group that was going to Theros because I had the book and I really liked the world, and I knew they were going to go into a different world anyway. They loved magic items, like who doesn't? But they had found a forge god, and lo and behold, Perforos is the forge god in Theros. But he has this long-time rivalry with Heliod. So I was like, oh, perfect. They're going to have this whole thing. Perforos has been gone. He'll come back. He'll need to find his hammer. He'll need to clear out his foundry so he can start building things for the players. Basically, I can have this quest giver that's sort of built into this thing, and I can justify why they get random magic items. And they customize them. It was all very fun. So they enter the world, and I made the mistake of the session before they entered the world. One of the kids was talking about one of his past lives, one of his other characters. And I happened to offhandedly, because they had been talking about Avatar before, I happened to offhandedly mention that if they were dealing with their past lives, their other characters, it'd be much more like Avatar, the way they sort of like meditate and see the other things. And that was my mistake. I mentioned the possibility of their past lives existing. And so as soon as they got into the new world, there's this forge god, and he's being attacked by this lion, and there's a champion of Heliod who's like, you'll never be back here, and all that stuff. And immediately that player just left. The character just was like, I'm flying away. I was like, you have a guy that's going to give you magic items. He's like, yeah, but I got to go find me, my past life. I'm leaving right now. I was like, but there was going to be a thing, and okay, let's do it. And I think that's why I think I'm okay with DMing kids for the most part, is because for the most part I don't know what's going to happen in a given session anyway. And when I plan, things like that happen. But that's the fascinating thing is finding like adults' motivations when playing D&D is very different than a kid's motivation when playing D&D. Their moral compass is very different as well. Like what they're okay with fighting, attacking. I've discovered don't send monsters that look like anything in real life to attack the kids because they're gonna try and make friends with it. Unless you want them to make friends with it, in which case, go nuts. But
sometimes it's the weirder it looks too. They're like, "Oh, I want that for a pet because it's weird. It may have just bit my hand when I try to give it a treat, but it'll still be my friend." Live and learn.
I do remember one of the very first ones when I first was getting started. There was like this big sort of lizard, and one of the players was like, "I'm going to give it a pear." They were transporting pears at the time, and I was like, It's carnivorous. It eats meat." She's like, "That's okay. I'm going to give it a pear." I'm like, "All right." It bites your hand. So yeah,
then obviously she's like, "Heck yeah, I made a friend. I lost a hand, but I made a friend."
Yeah. Whereas in the adult games, like what sort of things are happening and how you sort of the essentially the carrot on the end of the stick is going to be very different.
Sometimes you don't know what that carrot is until it came out of your mouth and you said there was a shiny light in the corner and you're referring to a reflection or something, and that's going to be all that's paid attention to. I mean, that's true in adult games too. Because it's just every word. I mean, you can manipulate. I manipulate. You can help tell a story and force it to directions by the words you choose and what you emphasize. And I like to do that a lot. That's one of my little private things that to me interesting is to be. It's interesting in general, but you try and set something up that they don't realize it's been under their nose the entire time, even though I've mentioned it. And I do. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's kids or adults. It's always fun to go. At that moment where you kind of hit your head. Those are fun.
What's funny is I almost do the opposite of that, where a lot of times I will listen to the sort of wild conjectures of the players, and I'll just be like, "That's amazing. Yes, let's do that." There was one of the rooms, they go into this room, and I described it. There's this fireplace and a desk and a comfy chair and a bookshelf with all these books. And so one of the kids is like, "I'm going to go find the book that when you pull on it, it turns the bookshelf around." And that wasn't there originally. I 100% that was not a thing. But as soon as he said it, I was like, "Well, yeah, it's there now." And sure enough, he found it. But what I love about that is when they have that moment, they're like, "Oh, I figured out the plan." You're like, "Yes, you're very smart. You figured it out before I did." So that's how it exists now.
Now, did you just have that bookshelf rotate, or did it actually reveal a separate room?
So
sometimes
the reason that one in particular worked very well was because there were two identical rooms directly next to each other. They happened to, and one of them had the MacGuffin. It was the key to get to the next room or whatever. The other one had a mimic. Because I love mimics, and I'll tell you a story about double doors and why some of the kids attack doors that they see. But either way, it was one of those ones where I was like, it'd be kind of fun because they've got these two identical rooms, and here's a perfect way to get them in the other room that's the false room that'll attack them, because they had by chance picked the room that actually had the MacGuffin in it. Which that one was fun too, because they essentially split the party, because one group was in the room already, the other one was in the other one. The chair started trying to eat them. It was a whole thing. It was loads of fun. And I guess that's ultimately what it comes down to is if their sort of suggestions can create more interesting, compelling stories, I'm going to go with that because, like a lot of times I don't bother to sort of fill out minor details. I had another game where there was a bunch of undead that had come to life, and they were terrorizing a village. They were basically just trying to get help, but they look like undead. They just didn't realize that they were. But anyway, I happened to have accidentally made the timeline work out with the past adventure that they'd been doing. And they're like, "Oh my God, maybe that weird magical thing that we played with before affected this." And I was like, I guess it did. Because originally my plan for why the undead was there was because magic. And that's as far as I'd gotten. So having that little extra sort of detail I thought was fun. And again, it made them feel smart because they're like, we figured out the thing. And I was like, you did. More than I did. So.
Yeah.
Also, I hope none of the kids that are actually playing with us are on the stream right now, because they'll now know all my secrets. Which is that they're running the game. I'm just sort of there to sort of poke them in the right direction.
You're monitoring. You're making sure that everything works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
I kind of thought that's who it was.
Yeah.
Was that?
Oh, it's Redwood.
Yeah.
Redwood is Drake's character,
yes.
right? Yeah. That one's a fascinating one because they have gone completely off the rails. I gave them a bag of magic beans, and they've been. I don't know if you've looked at this chart, but it's insane the things that happen to it. And one of the ones that I saw that I was like, "Ooh, this is beautiful," was like a pyramid will grow out of the ground and a mummy lord will be inside it, and I was like, "That's awesome!" And then they're like, "We're going to water it not with water, but with demon ichor." And I don't know if you've played with that stuff, but it mutates things horribly. So I was just like, "Yes." So they brought a ziggurat from the abyss into the material plane, which is fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a party.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a wacky one. That one's also unique because just over attrition, that group has ended up having just the 2 players, which I think is a very fascinating way to play because when you only have the 2 players, it can be a lot more focused. They can basically the things that they want to do are the things that they're doing. It's less sort of doing things by committee, which can kind of slow things down. And yeah, you can make really interesting stories. They've collected NPCs to sort of round out their the things that they don't have. But one of the things I've really loved is I've had a couple 3-player groups. Actually, the one with my parents. There was only it was my mom, my dad, and my now wife were playing, and having only 3 players is because D&D is built for 4. So having 3 made it really sort of interesting.
Yeah, I've noticed that I actually have a group that they really, really, really enjoy collecting friends to be able to help them in their adventures. And I'm like, no, you don't have to make so many friends. And they're like, I want pets. I want friends. And I'm just like, okay, all right, but I have to make the situation harder for you. So, like, I've got, like, a group of 4 kids that are running around with, like, 8 extra soldiers, and I'm like, guys, in order to really set a challenge, I have to make it really hard for you. And they're like, we don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one of my current groups. They've been acquiring, they've been rescuing people, and so now they've got a pirate ship full of. So they got a crew, and so I just kind of translated that. I was like, "There's a lot of people," and one of the characters was a background of a pirate, so it's like, "Let's time for the pirate ship," and we have the ship, so let's go. Although right now they're trapped on a desert island, so
makes sense.
Yeah, you gotta break the boat sometime.
That's very true.
Well, I think that's actually kind of a fascinating difference between, say, adults versus kids playing games. Is I feel like kids, in a lot of ways, adults sort of they want to be the main character, the hero of the thing, whereas kids don't necessarily like. Adults will sort of like put themselves into a single character. They'll sort of like pour themselves in, and that's their avatar. That's them, kind of a thing. Whereas I feel like kids are much more sort of okay with the idea of kind of just they're telling interesting stories. They don't have themselves wrapped up in a single character, so they can let other things sort of be the heroes as well. Which is a delightfully sort of non-narcissistic attitude.
I do still have some kids that are also like, I want to be a main character, and so then they do act as the main character. Whereas I do have a couple of other kids who are wanting to be like. I have a little fun story. So there's 2 kids. They wanted to start, or 3 kids. They wanted to start an item shop, like a magical item shop, to start selling items. Well, then one kid started doing outside research and found a luck blade and wanted to wish himself to have an army. So I kind of twisted it, and so now he does have an army, but he's starting to realize it's very, very challenging.
Yeah.
But it's funny because they give me so many ideas so that I'm just like, well, great. So now everyone's in that same city with the shop. Welcome to Flint, Florg, and Valtris's Magical Item Shop. Magical items inside of the shop with magic inside of the items. I'm a little extra when it comes to restating that fun little shop. As everyone who has heard me tell the tale, or the other kids who are running into the NPC magical item shop versus the actual item shop, I just like to make it more fun and just a lot longer to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Let's see. I guess I think we've talked a lot about kind of running online sessions. If there was something that you could tell yourself, what is this now? 6 months ago? 6 months ago. If you could open a small window, besides being like, hey, you're in this for the long haul. What is something that you wish that you had known when you first gotten started running online sessions?
Probably to dig through my garage to grab a whole bunch of cool stuff and just sit down and paint.
Yeah, if I don't know. That's a hard one because I think that it's been such a gradual thing. I can't imagine anything that I could say that was a giant, here you go. I think the biggest would just be it doesn't take as much work. Because when I started, I was like writing out the whole adventure, and I don't normally 100% do that. I have a little bit of background, but it was the pressure of like, oh, I'm going to really need to triple down on all the notes I needed to take and stuff. And also that keeping notes after each session is very important because you'll be like, there's no way I'm going to forget the name of that character. And then the next session rolls around, you're like, oh, I have no idea what I said that character's name was. So yes, very note taking would be the one. Yeah, I've gotten better, but I have had that bite me in the butt a couple times.
I literally have a spreadsheet that keeps the stats of all the players and all their names, and then underneath it is just pages and pages of notes of literally what have they done during the session. That's kind of a part of my cleanup. Oh, what did they do? And I just frantically type and just type as fast as possible, just because they did so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about you, Rob?
For me, it was honestly, and this is a silly thing, but. Have a glass of water next to you. I ran into this so many times where, when you're spending two hours of nonstop talking, you forget about the fact that you get a little parched. Yeah, and I think honestly that take notes for the individual sessions, because especially when you have multiple sort of storylines running in parallel, there's inevitably going to be a little bit of drift to it. So. Yeah,
I've mentioned my friend Karag, right? So there's actually some groups that have defeated Karag. There's other groups that are best friends with Karag, and there's also some other groups that are they're trying to make sure Karag's on their right side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very challenging. Remembering all those specific details is when we first started, like I said, doing that one adventure, I had to create a flow chart of which ones had found this item because it would cause something to happen at the end. And I had a lot of little Easter eggy things that some of the groups didn't find, or they could have possibly not freed the evil spirit, that kind of thing, and it comes back later if they don't. Although I don't think any group has ever not freed the spirit, but it was possible. But things like that, they never saw the secret room, that kind of thing. You want to keep those notes because you're going to refer to you didn't do that. Oh, okay.
Well, and then they're curious, right? Because you're like, what did you almost say? What didn't you find?
Yeah.
About it.
Well, so in that first adventure, there is a bit where a clockwork dragon, they can basically activate a clockwork dragon to fight the orc horde, but they had to find the different pieces and put it together throughout the dungeon run. And one of the groups didn't do that. They didn't find the pieces. They didn't look for it, and coincidentally, one of the people in that group joined a group that was running later and got to join the last fight. And it was halfway through that fight, and there's a giant clockwork shadow. You'll be seeing the same thing. It's a parallel dimension. It's playing out differently than what it did for you. And she was blown away. She's like, "There's a dragon." How did that happen? And they had to explain to her, "Oh, we found all these pieces. We could have done that," that kind of thing. So
spoilers, just in case, because I'm still running the same.
Sorry.
Oh, it's not a problem. I just think it's hilarious too.
Yeah. So I think ultimately, kind of what each of us have kind of come to the conclusion is that running a session online isn't actually, I think, very different from running a session in person. You have a couple of kind of advantages that you can have as far as manipulating what the players see and managing their character sheets. I think is a much easier sort of prospect. when I was doing the in-person groups, I ended up making a lot of like folios where essentially it was little pieces of. Oh, here we go. I got one over here. You have their character sheet in a little thingy. And what's nice about this is because it's all sort of plastic wrapped, you can sort of draw on it, and then you can erase it.
It's also a little more immune to water or soda.
Well, and then if they have if they have spells and things, I have all the spell cards because, again, I collect too much. So that was very helpful. What was funny was I was maintaining their characters on D&D Beyond as it was, just because like trying to manage all that information was very, very difficult. And I also discovered that both I and most kids don't have the best handwriting. I'm rubbish at it. Also, I get lazy when I'm writing my character sheets. I don't want to remember how many proficiencies or languages I have, but inevitably, I'll ask at some point, oh, do you speak this language? And the kids will be like, where is that? I'm like, well, during character creation, would have picked it. And they're like, cool. It's not on my character sheet. Whereas D&D Beyond, when you turn it into the PDF form, because that's what this is, like it has that nice sort of detailed version of all the actions they can take. It has all their weapons, making sure that you, as the session goes, if they get things, you actually like.
I prefer the online version of that just because the font size, you can't change the font size in that PDF, and it is tiny, and they jam things together. Like, but look at all that extra space you left. It could have been a bigger font. But, yeah.
Oh, also, there's a video that they did for D&D Beyond that goes over a lot of the customization you can do for stuff.
I just watched that.
You guys should absolutely watch that because a lot of the things that we do that sort of fudges, you can do very, very easily.
Yeah,
although you guys were actually changing the names of items as it was. Were you doing the customization and then changing the names?
Unless it was a specialized magic item.
I was making homebrew magic items and then importing them and doing that whole way. You can just right-click on a thing and just change the name,
I didn't realize the dual wield thing because you can click on the customize and you can hit dual wield for the second thing, and it'll use the rules for dual wield for that second item. Yeah,
it makes it a bonus action. It takes away the thing unless they have it for whatever reason. No, it's that part is awesome.
I didn't know it was there. I was like, woohoo!
Yeah, so we'll have to make sure I follow that.
Yeah,
it's
like the main screen on D&D Beyond today.
I think D&D Beyond just put it up. They go into a lot of detail about how you can customize your character sheets. So yeah, that kind of knowing your tools is definitely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is the D&D Beyond under the hood can be a pain. Like making custom magic items, or if you try and do like a custom spells aren't that bad. Some of the details, they're just tricky, and you'll just bang your head against the wall with some of that. It's just wow. Because I've done a lot of for my games I run for fun. I have a lot of custom stuff, and it's a whole custom world, and so I have custom subclasses and races, and implementing that in D&D Beyond is a lot of work, and it's a lot of like, oh, why didn't that show up? Oh boy, I did some little thread wrong, but the basic stuff, it's really good.
Yeah, like customizing the name. I kind of took a page out of your book and just be like, oh yeah, so this is a +2 sword. Well, how about the Sword of Ander Brightwood? That sounds way cooler than a +2 sword.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about that before with the pre-setting things up, kind of exploring the tools beforehand. I actually recently discovered the combat tracker, which I'm enjoying the heck out of because you can put the initiative in it and you can track the monster's hit points with it. It'd be awesome if there was some more functionality as far as like players' hit points and all yada yada, all that stuff. But honestly, it's obviously still in development. Which is always weird to think that like D&D Beyond is relatively new, all things considered. I think it is only like a year or two old at this point. But what's crazy too is when it first kind of got going, my wife had a look at it and she was like, I don't like this because it doesn't feel like a character sheet. Because the way that they originally sort of set it up, it was their own. So they were like, this probably makes the most sense. But it didn't follow the same sort of feel of the character sheet, which ultimately meant that, she was just like, I don't like it. But I think they've done a lot to really make it feel more like sort of that regular character sheet that you're used to. What's also nice is if you have the subscription, you can share the content with the kids. Big monster. Ooh, that's a good scene.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That's it's good for the giant.
Right, yeah, no, for the character or for the hero, that's kind of a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. It's funny because D&D is very much a thing of imagination and like sort of building these structures through words and imagination. But what's kind of fascinating, and I think that as you're running these sessions for other people online, is remembering that you can be a little bit more cinematic with your camera, with what you're doing with your camera. So like, doing that sort of low angle, looking at the sheer size of the monster can be a lot of fun. I love reveals, like having stuff sort of pre-set up and then just doing a simple pan and you're like, there's a monster there. It's been there the whole time. That can be a lot of fun. And so I think kind of trying to leverage that difference, the fact that you can control exactly what the players are looking at, you can really, I think, paint a very beautiful picture with it, which I think obviously can add an extra level of complexity and challenge to it. But I think just always remembering, like, remembering that you have this sort of camera view that you can manipulate, and the orc on the giant.
Right, exactly. Gotta make it fun.
Focus has gotten very angry though.
Yeah.
I think the you don't necessarily have to be like, taking like classes or whatever on like staging and setting things up, but just like thinking about, your favorite movies or TV shows or whatever, like, you've seen media, like, sort of how things should be sort of set up as far as like, spacing and that thing goes. So just, kind of try to imagine what like a Lord of the Rings show would look like or a movie or whatever. And that can really help your sort of framing and staging.
Yeah. My go-to is like the old film serials or like Indiana Jones, where you're just constantly like, you want to keep escalating, and so if you want to end on, I try to end on like a reveal, like that you tune in next week or tune in next session to find out what this is. And sometimes I try and like end with a little bit of a, like, and next time maybe we'll see this, or what are you guys going to find out about this guy, that you just walked in the room, that kind of thing.
Oh, I like to end on cliffhangers, and because we live in a world of streaming, a lot of kids are just like, what? Why do you keep doing this to us? And I'm like, have you guys not seen TV shows? And then Jason brought up a great fact that since we live in the world of Netflix, the entire season is online, and then they don't have to like wait a whole week, whereas I remember needing to wait an entire week for the next episode to find out what happens. So when the kids have to experience it, they're like, the TVs aren't like this. And I'm like, yes, they were.
Well, and you go even farther back, it's 1,101 nights, 1,001 nights.
Oh, yeah. Sherazade. Yep.
Yeah, that one. It's kind of a weirdly morbid story, but for those of you who haven't heard it before, there's this guy that would marry these women and then would kill them because he wanted a different wife for whatever reason. So this one gal is like, I know what's going to happen. So she tells the dude this very compelling story, but she ends on a cliffhanger because he always kills at night. And so he had to basically keep her alive so he could, before they, could hear the end of the story. But then, of course, as soon as she ends the story, she'd start a new one that had this very compelling cliffhanger ending. And then after, I think, 1,001 days...
1,001 nights.
Huh?
1,001 nights. That's the name of the book, because that's the...
Yeah. After 1,001 nights, he spent enough time with her that he's like, I actually kind of like you. I won't maybe kill you or whatever. But yeah, I was like the idea that like the origin of the cliffhanger, and it probably isn't. I'm talking out of my backside at this point. But the concept of the origin of the cliffhanger being from this gal being like, please don't kill me. Which is terrible, but yeah.
It happens.
I do always enjoy doing those sort of like literary deep cuts for inspiration for things, which I think honestly. So one of the things I'd love to do, and since we're at this kind of point of I think we've talked a lot about on running online sessions, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, what challenges we've overcome. I would like to do sort of more of these. I think you guys have a lot of great experience. I think talking about things like what bits and bobs we have, our maps and pieces and things, I think would be a great thing to talk about. Talking about like how we construct stories, how we sort of build narratives. I think these will all be really fun, interesting things to talk about, and especially with our similar experiences and yet very different kind of experiences. Basically to the world at large, if this is something that you've enjoyed and you'd like to see more of, make sure to send us messages on the Facebook is a great way. Let's see, Zulu.
We do have Discord as well.
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh yeah, no, you can't post links.
We can't spam the link in the chat.
Yes, no links in the chat.
There is a Zulu's Discord, and I will just tell you if you send an email to Zulu's Dmd with the letter N, that is our sort of shared D&D account. If you want more information about that, I think there's also a sign up form on the website. So if you go to the website, go to online role playing. I don't remember what it's called. There will be a link there you can click that you can sign up, and we can get you more information. But yeah, I think we've done a good talk.
So real quick, it's Zulu's D&D, and then it's at Gmail. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to email us. So it's Zulu's D&D at gmail.com.
Yep. Do you have any parting words you wanted to give to the lovely people on the internets?
Keep gaming. Have fun. It's just, I guess keep gaming is what I would say.
Yeah.
Feel free to send us questions.
Yeah.
We check the email pretty regularly, so we can try to get a hold of you. Keep an eye on the Facebook. There will be either more of these or more just D&D events in general. Since school has started, we're not doing 2 or 3 sessions a day, which means we are less sort of insane, which is great.
You speak for yourself. I've got 7 days of D&D.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair. So,
but yeah, no, it's definitely a blast, and I'm excited for like the opportunities we've got. It's gonna be awesome. Very excited.
All right, Jason. End the stream.
All right. I am ending it.
All right.